All right, Mr. Larry Onan, thank you so much for joining us on the Coach Launch podcast today.
I'm so glad to be here. If we can help launch or coach somebody, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to diving into the session. You have a lot of great story to tell, and I'm looking to dive into that. So today, welcome to Coach Launch. Guys, today we're chatting with Larry Onan, an expert in fund development and stewardship strategies, who is changing the way nonprofit organizations succeed with their creative powers and is helping people with his new book, an international seller, Living and Giving. Did I get that right?
Intentional living and giving. Yeah. There's a word intentional.
Intentional living
Yeah.
and giving people an opportunity to discover purpose, value, and wealth. Now, Larry is a graduate of the University of Colorado, spent 18 years as part of the CRU team, helping raise over $150 million for evangelism and other vital initiatives. For over 30 years as a vice president of stewardship strategies with Management Development Associates, his work has empowered ministries worldwide to achieve financial success. Amazing. Larry's expertise as a mentor and consultant continues to inspire and guide many through his books, including the latest, Intentional Living and Giving. He is not just a force in the professional space, but also a dedicated grandfather who relishes time with family in Highland, California. Amazing. Let's discover how Larry makes his impact in the world today. Guys, let's go. Larry, so let's kick this off. Let's kick this off. And can you share with me some defining moments in your early career that's led you towards this path of leadership, fundraising, and writing books?
Well, I sure never planned that to be my career and my direction. In fact, for 5 years of my life, I knew I was going to end up in Broadway or New York. I was consumed by the theater, and I was doing everything I could to decide where I was going to land, and I was majoring in theater arts at the University of Colorado my junior year. I woke up one day in a classroom, or I didn't wake up, but I just realized sitting in a class that everybody in the class was acting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I thought, this is an empty shell. It was fun to put on characters and be somebody else. But when you put on a character and you live behind a mask, there was just something wrong. And I got uneasy for the first time in my life that this was not something that I was really wanting to do for the rest of my life. And I'd been raised in an environment where faith was important. My father was a church planter after World War II, and I grew up in western Colorado in the beautiful Rockies. And I'd been exposed to a religious thing, but I'd pretty much rejected a lot of that because I was identifying as a kid of more hypocrisy probably than I wanted to see. But it was at the University of Colorado, of all places, when I met two engineering students that were just great friends. They immediately adapted me into their life. They knew nothing about theater. I knew absolutely nothing about their engineering backgrounds that they were pursuing. But I started to realize they had something very genuine that I don't think I had, and that was a personal faith. And that really catapulted me, a turning point in my life that took me in another direction. So I did graduate from the University of Colorado with an English speech, theater arts major to go teach secular education at high schools. And I never taught a day in the classroom after I graduated. So that's what I started doing. I thought I would do other things in my career. I don't have a business background in college. That doesn't mean I can't use a calculator and do some of the right things in business. And I learned the business side by experience, much more so than by the book. But it was probably a couple of years into my work with an international mission that I was asked to take on a project that was really in shambles. We'd had a very large, enormous conference, and we'd had an enormous international pledge, a financial pledge made by roughly 80,000 students. And those pledge cards came back to the headquarters of this organization, and 28 boxes ended up in a bathtub, sitting there for somebody to do something with them. And this was 90 days after the commitments were made. The vice president of the organization said, could you take these boxes and maybe figure out how we can follow up on what was committed? And that was my introduction to a no total career change. And you talk about an adjustment. I had never done fund development other than I'd raised my own support as a missionary. But there was no book, there was no plan, there was no guidance, there was no coaching, there was no consulting. It was just go figure it out. And early on, Matthew got a mentor of mine. I was saying, I don't know if we can do this. I don't know what to do. And he said, Larry, you've always got the freedom to fail. And I think many people are afraid of this, so they never step out and try something that is maybe out of their comfort zones. And I was pressed all of my career to go ahead, Larry, you've got the freedom to fail. If it doesn't work, you can tweak it and do it again. You can learn from the mistakes that you made and go at it again. So to me, failure was never viewed as, oh my gosh, I'm falling off the rails. It's a collapse. What am I going to do? I'm undone. It was always, okay, there's a way to do this if we sit down and reevaluate what we did right, what we did wrong. That actually led me into leading for the organization, the first open, what you call an office of development or offer for doing the fund development. And that through about 12 or 13 years where I went from 2 people to 120 people from no 70. Right. It was an experience, but in that process, I was given a very strange assignment, and that is what really catapulted me even differently. Because Matthew, in that process, I've been successful enough that they wanted me to attend a meeting from some people they had brought in on the outside about raising very, very large sums of money that had not been done in the Christian market. And I just sat there knowing I was the lowest on the totem pole, but it was nice to be invited. And the consulting group said, if you don't teach lifestyle stewardship and how people can be generous in their hearts, you're going to create competition rather than be an asset. And you've got to teach lifestyle stewardship. And people said, what's lifestyle stewardship? And I had no clue. I thought stewardship meant the preachers had to preach on money twice a year, and collect the tithe, as you've heard in many different places. Get the money and manipulate the people so they give more money. But it was that assignment that somebody said in the room, well, let's assign that to Larry and see if he can't help us figure out what's meant by this. No one ever followed it up. Nobody asked me how I was doing on the assignment. I realized later it was probably a ploy to get off the topic. But in that process, we learned, I brought my team together. There was 4 or 5 guys that were working with me. And I said, I don't know what they really mean by this, but if we can figure it out, it could change how we do work and how we relate to the people that give to the organization. And that was a radical change because the 5 or 6 of us over 6 weeks period started to hammer out what does the Old Testament and New Testament of the Bible say really about generosity and giving and the spirit of giving. And that's really it totally changed what we did. As a result of that, we did everything differently. Even to this day, many organizations are picking up on the pattern we created because it works. And it's not a technique. It's just core, what I call biblical principles that are 5 biblical principles. So that was a radical.
Well, I want to get a little bit of a dive into some of the stuff that you were talking about there. So here's the thing, right? You came into this meeting, you said at the bottom of the totem pole, like you've done some things, right? You put your hand up, you've been doing a few things and people have kind of noticed the thing that you're doing, right? And I think that's a very important topic to discuss, is that for people when if you want to grow in life or grow in business, if you're not putting your hand up for stuff, you're just never going to be recognized. No one's going to know you, right? You're not going to be like, you just stay at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak. But you were doing something in the organization, you were fresh, you didn't know stuff, but you put your hand up to do things, and people going, oh, Larry, he's doing something, right? And they've invited you into this meeting, which literally changed everything for you.
Well, they didn't know it was going to change me like it did. I mean, it was kind of like, it was my consolation prize. They could have gone to a nice meeting for a couple of hours. It was life transformation in my personal life. When my wife and I started to apply the principles that we were learning, it just changed everything we did. In the nonprofit world, I just came from a board activity for a nonprofit a few hours ago. And And it's true today. Most people are looking how they can get donors. That's the word they use, donors. We got to have
Yeah.
donors.
Yeah.
Well, a donor is a person that gets a needle in the arm and gives blood and gets a sugar cube or a cookie as a result. And knowing that your blood's going to probably help somebody, but that is a donor. It's an extraction of something. And we were extracting money from people. We were trying to be smart in doing it. Fundraising around the world, if you watch fundraising commercials on television, radio today, any place else, there's always a carrot. If you do this today, we will give you this. Maybe it's a blanket, maybe it's a t-shirt, maybe it's a trip to meet the president, or if you give enough money, we'll have you come to the next conference and sit at the president's table. There's always an exchange. There's nothing sinful about that. It's just a lot of hard work because you're trying to always find another thing that would attract people to do what they want to do. When I got into lifestyle stewardship, I started realizing that I didn't need to be manipulating and playing games. I could invite people that were not owners of the stuff, not owners of their money, but they were stewards of what God had entrusted to them. This is a biblical view, but when you don't own anything and you're now responsible for managing what you hold, you look at life very differently. It's not what I own, it's what I've been trusted with. Matthew.
So good. So there's a mental shift in that, right? It's a little bit of a different place.
That's right.
So you're coming in through your journey, and you're making some things happening. You're learning about stewardship. I want to highlight on that growth that you had, right? You said from a small team to this massive team. How many people did you say? I think it was 100 something.
When we got those 28 boxes, I had a guy that was in engineering. He'd spent 6 years in the nuclear submarines in the Pacific. And he wanted to join the organization I was with. He came in. He was an engineer to the core. He was not the greatest people person. And I met him 15 minutes before I go into the meeting where I find those 28 boxes. And the two of us carried those boxes and said, what in the world do we do with a pledge commitment of $2 million that's over 90 days old? They hadn't even taken out of the boxes since they'd been shipped to the corporate headquarters. And the two of us started learning together. Now, we started hunting down what we knew to, who was good at doing this and how do you do this and how do you use technology? How do you put 80,000 names into a computer? There was no computers to do a lot of this stuff. So we're talking about at the beginning of a whole different generation of thinking. And we were fortunate to get on the cusp of what that all meant. But we were not sitting back thinking that we were the wisest guys in the world. It was early on, it was a wing and a prayer. It was amazing. You didn't know where it was going. But what we discovered as that developed, I brought other people in. I gave them assignments. We went to a few seminars of like-minded birds of a feather, so to speak, flocking together. And then I started building, I needed people to work in mail and direct mail and people to work with foundations and people to work with churches and people to work with just what you call small contributors. And then we needed to figure out how to deal with the very larger contributors. And so we built departments to focus on various aspects. And that grew in a very organic way. There was no real plan to grow anything, except we felt like we had to build structure to do what we were doing. And there was very few people in this industry that could even tell us what to do. I was early on. It was, a few places like Harvard and Stanford, they had some endowments. And it's not to say that there wasn't anything out there, but it wasn't structured enough to where I even knew how to go find it. And
it's crazy. So if you think about it, right, from your early beginnings, coming out of this idea of wanting to act to now having a fully fledged team, right? You're growing a business, like to raise funds at that level to 150 million, like that's not an easy task, right? So you got all your management, you're literally learning on the fly, management skills, leadership skills, and obviously skills on how to draw in money from, communities to provide funding, right? Like that doesn't just happen like that, right? It doesn't happen quickly or easily. It takes, there must have been a lot of failures along the way.
There were failures, but we had the freedom to fail. If it didn't work, nobody knew it was a bad news. We said, well, we didn't like it that way. Let's tweak it we started doing weekend seminars. And probably the first weekend seminar for executives, that was what it was for, helping, people could give larger sums. And then we started saying, what do we teach them? Well, we got to get content that really meets their heart. We started teaching them what we were learning in a seminar format. That was the first time I started seeing, as we started doing those seminars, I met people that said, I've always thought I had the ability to make money, but I didn't know why I had this ability. I remember one guy, Matthew, he had just retired and sold his business, and he wanted to go into missionary work. And he came to this seminar, and 3 hours after we'd gone through the content that we were training him on, he came up to me and he said, I came here with the intention of retiring and doing what I wanted to do, but I now know, because I've got an ability to make wealth and make money, that my gifting is to do that. And I'm going to go back and start another business that does not compete with what I sold. I know how to do it, and I want to give all the proceeds away for the next 10 years. Wow, so he came, amazing. And he would, and he started, he says, I'm not pursuing what I came to do. I'm going back to do something else. And he started another business, and probably for almost 10 years, he operated that business, made equally as much money, gave almost all the profits to causes that he believed in. And then I saw him, and he was probably 10 years older, close to it by then. And we talked again, and he said, well, I still want to do some missionary work. So I'm going to sell this business. And for the next few years, I want to do what I was going to talk to you about 10 years ago. And he did. He had a great time encouraging other peers, because now he was a living example of doing it. And he helped people decide how they were going to use acquired wealth for important purposes and missions. But that happened over and over again. We often think that if we can just get a person up to a certain level, we've arrived. And so if I can just get you to give me $500, that's great. Now I'm going to try to get you to do $600 and now $1,000. And maybe if I get really lucky, you can give me $15,000. Well, there is an element of growth. You've got to have it, and I got to have it. So there is something called fund development's called steps and stages in growth. It takes you a while to catch up with what your potential is. Matthew, I had a guy that started supporting a missionary, and she was spending a lot of time at his home with his wife. And he had supported her. I don't know what the amount was. Let's say it was $50 a month. And he said, eventually I gave her a little bit more money so she could get to the location, because frankly, I thought she was spending too much time at my house. So I thought if I could get her into her assignment, then she would be doing what she wanted to do. So he gave her a couple $1,000, startup money along the way. She had no clue what his potential was. She was just very real with the family. And he says, we really loved her. He says, but that got me into supporting a few more people. It was 4 or 5 years before he gave any hint to his capacity. And once he started doing what his capacity was, he gave $48 million over the next 7 years. Now, he had the capacity when he was given $50 a month. He had just his frame of reference to what was really important with life, and realized that he had come into an environment where it was, you might call it a cash cow. It was making money for him all the time. And he said, it's not my money now. He says, I thought it was my money for all my life until I realized I'm a steward of what God's allowing me to do. Now I've got to be smart in giving it away. So that was the main and mindset change. And I think we're talking about mindset changes. There's some key things to do. If I'm talking to a leader, I would probably tell him, first of all, if you don't write it down, it doesn't exist. What are you committed to? Where are you going? And so I really strongly have a belief it's not in writing. If it doesn't exist, then it's just a passing thing through your brain. It's gone. Mm-hmm. But if you write it down, you can start to edit your own thoughts. years ago, Matthew, 10 years ago, my wife died of a glioblastoma brain tumor. And after she died and transferred her address to eternity, I said, now what am I going to do? I'm still young enough to do a lot in life. And I went back to some of my core principles. And I said, if I'm going to live a life of contentment, I've got to come up with 10 I wills. And I came up with 10 I wills. Now, they're not all spiritual things. One of them is I will not go over 205 pounds in weight. And my will live at 195 pounds. Okay, that was a frame. It gave me barriers. I can sneak up there once in a while. But to this day, I swim 3 days a week. And I walk twice a week. I walk 2 miles. Now, that's not because I like to swim and I like to walk. But if I'm going to maintain good health, I've got to do things. I will maintain a good health in the remaining years. Okay. I will spend time with 6 grandkids in the appropriate places of where they are in life. One's a 23-year-old, a 19-year-old, and on the other end is a 10-year-old. And I've got a 17-year-old granddaughter that's a Down's child. So every child has got its unique way that grandpa needs to impart life to them and be real at their level. And it's very different spending time with a 10-year-old than it is a 23-year-old that's at Dallas Theological Seminary. Brain trust is very different. So I think what we've got to do is say, I will do those things. Now, it would be easier not to worry about them except give them Christmas gifts. But I need to be intentional, and that's why the word intentional is in the name of the book. Intentional living and giving means you've got to make some commitments. And that's what I basically have done. I've got 10 of those, and I visit them probably 2 or 3 times a year. It's not religious. It is a matter of, I said I would do it. Do I still believe I should do it? So I think anybody needs to say, okay, it's like my friend that said, I'm going to go back into business. He was basically making a commitment to change his direction because he knew he had the capacity to make wealth. I don't have I don't have a clue what he did to make as much money again. But he was successful because he knew already by his history what he was going to be good at doing. So I think it's also...
That is so good. I want to dive into something here, Larry. You've obviously met some amazing people along your journey, some wealthy people, some maybe not so wealthy. Talk to me about some of your best relationships, or some of the interesting people that you've met along the journey that have helped to inspire you or change the way you've thought.
The people that I probably would see in that category is people that have had a humble spirit and an orientation to the role that God plays in their lives. They were real, honest to goodness people. Believe it or not, the wealthiest people in the world put on pants just like you and I put on pants. There is no wow factor. In fact, isn't it sad that we are seeing more people commit suicide of great wealth than about any other category? And when you go into categories of what's going on out there, you see people dying all the time, and they're leaving millions of dollars behind because they'd realized that the accumulation and fame is not what gives them joy and purpose. And so the people I've been most impressed with are probably the most average people. And then you discover after working with average people how much they've been blessed and how much they see that they are contributing because they have a responsibility to be a steward. The word steward, Matthew, means one that's in charge of the affairs of somebody else. And in the...
Right. Sorry, one who is in charge?
Yeah, one who is in charge of the affairs of somebody else.
And so define that in the terms of what you've got in your book. Obviously, plays a very big impact on your whole journey, right? So explain it in a little bit more context.
I realized in that journey of discovering those 5 principles, I realized that I don't own a thing and nobody else owns anything. We were entrusted with things. In the Pentateuch, the Old Testament, the first 5 books of the Old Testament are the righteous books of the entire Jewish population today. Genesis, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Those books are what's called the law. And the second chapter talks about God coming down and walking and relating to man. He created man, but we think many people think, well, God created it. If he did it all, he left them alone to do their thing. But the scriptures say he came and walked with Adam and Eve. That was the two names of the people. And he stuck with them because he wanted to relate to them. And he gave them responsibility, but he did not give them what he created. He didn't turn the world over to them. He didn't turn the universe over to them. He didn't even turn the animals over to him. But he said, Adam, you can go name all the animals. He gave Adam, steward, responsibility to take care of my stuff. Now, Adam blew it pretty badly because he got very self-centered in the story that you will find in the Old Testament. And the rest of the entire book, the Bible story from there forward, is about how God's trying to redeem this relationship. And when man has a connection with that relationship, he's going to find a whole different way of thinking. And the people I dealt with picked up on that. There was a guy up in Canada years ago, and he would never ever fly first class because it was a waste of money. But the last time I had any conversation about that family is they'd given over $100 million in 20 years. And they were working on $100 million because the business that they had was very profitable in the industry that they were working with. Now, he was still not flying first class because priority to him was, this is not mine. I'm managing it. I'm just taking care of it. And I want to make sure it goes in the right places. Now, the downside of that experience is if you're a good steward, you're going to be inspecting how your investment is working. And a lot of nonprofits today do not like the inspection going on. They don't like people sticking their nose under the tent and asking hard questions. They think once you get money, it's their money. And it's not. And so what I see, even the wisest stewards would say, now I want accountability. I want to know what's the result of what I gave, and I want you to report to me twice a year. And I would see people squirm on how do they report twice a year on the use of money. And the more money they give, the more accountability they expect from you. Because the transfer of wealth, it was not mine to give you anyway. I'm entrusting it to you like it was entrusted to me. But my stewardship says I've got to ask hard questions about how you're using it. So the wealthy people that give this way are also going to be asking difficult questions because it's a part of their responsibility. So I over my life that, yes, they recognize that they are stewards of something. They recognize that it's important to ask others. They understand the principle of what they call the laws of the harvest. You know, a farmer doesn't go out and plant seeds and then go on vacation and never take care of his farm. He takes care of the seed and he grooms it. It's a process of growth. In my neighbor's backyard, there was an orange tree for years. And the orange tree produced once a year in January and February. And if you didn't take care of the orange tree, and that's what happened to it, it did not get the water it needed as it changed owners. And 2 weeks ago, they took the orange tree out of the backyard. It was dead. It had died because of neglect. But 20 years, it made the best oranges possible, but only once a year. And you had to fertilize it and water it and take care of it to have the harvest. And so, you know, the law of the harvest is a very important part of this. If you're a steward and you learn how to ask, and you also know the principles of the law of the harvest, and you realize that my asking is not just with God, but I can ask you, Matthew. My responsibility is to invite you to be involved. If I don't invite somebody to be involved, they may not realize they could be involved. So I think many times there's in the nonprofit world, or people think, well, if they just knew what we were doing, they would want to give. Probably tends to know they need to say, would you consider doing X as a partnership with us? Would you invest in this? A few weeks ago, a guy came to me and he says, after hearing my partner story, he said, there's an investment that you may want to look into. I'm not telling you to. do it, but this may be something that's of interest to you because you like to give. Would you like to? And he said to me, would you like to be involved? That began a conversation about my involvement. Other than that, it was just pure information that I was gaining.
Yeah, it
It
is.
is a key part of that. And then watching all of these elements, they all come together. The book is designed around, here's the 5 principles, and you can study those. And then the latter half of the book is called part 2. And it is, how do you live? And I call it, jokingly, I've called it for years, become an authorized wealth distributor. You give.
So just let's take a step back. I want to tell me about your 5 principles. What is that all about?
Well, your 5 principles the principles are very key phrases that I've used in here. Number 1 is God owns it all. And then my father wants me to give hilariously. My father's designed me to be one that gives. A very famous universal verse out of the Bible says, God so loved the world that he gave. God's a giver. Yeah. He made us in his image. He wants us to give. So I've got to recognize that I need to be ready to be generous. I didn't say money now. In the book that I wrote, there's only 1 chapter on money because people are expecting a chapter on money. I'm talking about lifestyle living. And one of the things you can give is money, but there's at least 100 things that you and I can give today using our gifts, our networks, our strategies, our encouragement, listening ear to a next door neighbor that's really hurting. That's giving. So God gave to us. He wants us to give to others. It's God giving to people and people giving to people. And then you have that whole element of asking. That's the 3rd principle. The principle is, I want you to ask me because I think you need to learn how to ask. In the book of Deuteronomy, one of those 5 books of the law, I'll give you the Larry O'Nan in translation because I'm not good in Hebrew. But God basically says to the people in Deuteronomy, I don't need your money, but I need you to learn to put me first in all things. Yeah. It's not about you giving me money. It's about you learning to be generous and you putting me in the middle of your thought. And then after you find out that, of course, the law of the harvest is the 4th principle, and you can then give abundantly beyond what you could ever ask or think. Now, here's what happens. God is not going to dump and waste his generosity on poor stewards. You are a steward whether you like to be or not. And the stewardship really depends on your faithfulness of how you carry out your job. If I had a cup of coffee with me and I poured it full to the brim and I showed it to you, you'd say, don't fill it completely full. You're going to spill it. I think what's in God's mind, he probably fills us to the brim and he says, what are you going to do with what I just gave you? Because my coffee pot is completely full. I can give you more, but until you give what you got away or drink it, in other words, consume it, do something with it, I'm not going to waste it. I'm not going to let you spill it on the floor and go all over, make a big mess. So God's principle of abundance is, I want to see your generosity, and then I can trust you with more generosity. And it's not about the money. I mean, I think many times there's if you go worldwide, you'll run into a doctrine today or a theology called word of faith. And it's all about me giving to somebody so that I get more. And it's always like it. Right. In fact, you've heard the term worldwide. It's called seed faith. You give to me and God's going to bless you. Well, that is self-serving. When you think about it, it's just, you're giving to get. You're not giving to get, to give, to get, to give, to, you're not thinking cycle. You're thinking about satisfaction and you're thinking about abundance right here and now. The scripture is full in Old and New Testament of people suffering a great deal. It is not a book of people just living on High Street because they followed principles. God's word says you're going to suffer. You're going to sometimes have bad experiences. I mean, in the culture of the United States, we've watched an assassination of a guy that's a really good guy. Now, doesn't mean everybody agreed with him, but that was not supposed to happen. That wasn't his. God did not want him just to die to assassinate somebody. Because there are going to be times when bad things do happen to good people. But that doesn't mean God's out
Cool.
of the picture. It means that God's got something else in mind that's going to probably take it to a different direction. But I think when you see those
Yeah.
5 principles, Matthew, kind of working together as a hand, and you don't
Yeah.
just go out and realize one of those, you realize all 5. And when all,
Could you list? Can you list those 5 principles?
yeah,
So
I'll just do that
Yeah.
real quickly here. Yeah, it's first of all, God owns it all. Number 1. Number
Yeah.
2, my Father wants me to give hilariously. Hilarious is a word that
Cool.
is from the Greek word that means to cause to shine like the sun. It means you've got to do it because you're made to do it. Be generous in your spirit. Number 3 is my Father wants me to ask. Number 4, my Father wants me to follow the principles of farming. The law of the harvest. And then the last principle is I can give from God's abundant supply.
Wow. Those are so good. I love that. I love that.
The first 9 chapters in the book go into those 5 principles.
Wow. That's so good. So I love this. So the idea of all of this is that to live an abundant, wealthy life, learn to be a steward and give. Then giving is the core message that you're sharing. And the more you give, the more you will receive.
That is true. And it's living is the same way. A steward wakes up every morning saying, how can I bless somebody else? What can I do to influence and make somebody else happy? I chair a board of an organization in town. It's a secular board. It's humanitarian. Of all names, it's called Santa Claus Incorporated. And all we do is help kids in need. And when I got involved 13, 14 years ago, we were helping 20,000 kids a year. This year, we'll help over 250,000 kids. All we're doing is applying some core principles, even into meeting the needs of kids that are going to be forgotten in this community and forgotten in the world. And I volunteer my time as the board chairman and trying to help them because I'm using my skills and abilities. Now, I give to them financially too, but it's not that my financial gift is what they're after. They're after my expertise, my help, my thinking. That's what I do in giving. And that's just one of the things I give to. So I wake up saying, how can I help today make a big difference wherever I've got to be? And it could be, okay, what am I going to do to spend 2 hours with a 10-year-old? That's a meaningful connection for him to know grandpa better. That is giving too. And it's giving sometimes where it's more uncomfortable for me. If you've not spent 2 hours with a Downs child that has difficulty communicating and you want her to connect well with you, that's giving when you don't know what you're going to get out of it. It's just giving so that she knows love and she knows an interest. She knows grandpa really cares. And those things are equally important. It is not about money. It's about life. And I think sometimes people think, well, if I could just get around rich people, I could do this. Or if I could just add to my collection. I've seen more people add to their collection and then have no idea what to do with it. I was in Spain last spring, and we walked down to the harbor of the city where we were in, and there was probably 25 or 30 yachts that were worth $20 million plus parked in the water. Really, nobody was on them. They were just sitting there because they don't know what else to do with them. That is not the use of wealth wisely. I'm not saying that the boat is bad, but it's not good stewardship. And I think we've got to ask everybody, and what am I doing today to be wise in the use of my stewardship? Do I really need to go out and eat, or do I really need to do that? What else can I do to leverage my giving to be more effective? What can I do to spend time with my next door neighbor? Can I mow his lawn because he can't get out there and push it? Or whatever the issue is. I think generosity and giving is at the heart of the change. And then we can apply it to anything in life that we are entrusted with. And by golly, if you're entrusted to make financial wealth, then be prudent in doing a good job of that and ask darn hard questions about how it's being spent. Because you're going to make the organization you give to even more effective by asking hard questions. Now, that doesn't mean they may not like it very well, but it's a part of your stewardship. And when you realize that's, all I'm doing is fulfilling my purpose. And that's what I can wake up for, Matthew, every day and say, today is a day of joy and I can be I got gratitude. I've got good health, but whatever I've got is for me to invest today and pass it on. And maybe I can help somebody else turn the corner, a turning point in their life to say, I've been going north and really I should go another direction. In the United States, I live in a place where I'm 2,500 miles from Seattle, Washington, or 25 miles from Dallas, Texas. And I'm about 1,800 miles from Seattle, Washington. But there's a decision I've got to make to decide to go east or north. That doesn't say one direction's worse than the other, but there's a decision along the way. Do I choose to make a decision that will help transform lives, or am I going to keep on accumulating, thinking I'm building more barns and creating more storage? Probably the saddest thing I see in the United States, and maybe you see it in other places around the world, is enormous storage units where people store their junk. And there's a brand new one being built 2 miles from me, and it's called self-storage. And it will be full of junk within about 3 months. And half of them will hardly ever be opened again.
Yeah.
Because we
So
store
true.
our junk because we don't want to deal with the redistribution to where it could be used the most. So I think
That's
that's
crazy.
what I'm talking about in life, Matthew. It's a journey that is full of joy, and it's the Apostle Paul in the New Testament said it this way: I have learned to be content in whatever circumstance I'm in. I've learned to live with plenty, and I've learned to live with nothing. And when he was writing that, he was in prison. It was one of the prison epistles that he wrote about. But I can be content in any circumstance. And the question really to listeners and thinkers, how can I live a contented life? I think we should have courage, because we need to step out and take some bold steps. And courageousness is kind of scary to get into because you could lose money in it, or you could lose time. Courage means you've got liabilities. And that is, if I lose it all, whose was it in the first place? If it's not mine and it's gone, I can still have contentment with nothing. So, that's my life story, I guess, in a nutshell, Matthew. I'm just trying to help people thrive when many of them are just barely succeeding right now in life.
I understand that, and that's an amazing cause. So there's a lot that we've gone through. Going back to your 5 key principles, because I love that whole idea of giving to receive and living, right? So, I mean, you can give financially, you can give of yourself. In today's crazy world that we live in, so many people are so self-absorbed by their goods, their gatherings, and like you just said, they've got all these storage units of storing their stuff, right? That's how self-absorbed we have got. I mean, if you think back to what the cavemen would have done,
Yeah.
this is where we are now, right?
We're repeating.
It's a big.
We haven't learned very.
So, what would be the message? What would be the key message here that you would give to people? Like, because I totally get it, and I understand the value of giving. If you want to build wealth, you want to build a life of abundance, giving is a core fundamental principle. Like, well, what would be a key message you would say to people to help them understand the value of that, like how important that is in business, in life, just in your community, etc. Because people are afraid to give. I think so many people are afraid of it. There are people that love to give, but there's a lot of people that are afraid to give, or they don't know what giving even means.
Yeah. Well, I think the first step along that way is to say, okay, I'm changing my mind. That's what repenting is. I've been thinking about money. I've been thinking about life. I've been thinking about consumer mentality. And I want to say, I don't want to live that way anymore. That's a choice. And a choice needs to be made that says, I choose not to go that direction. what saddens me in our culture today is the self-absorbed people are pretty miserable people. And if you just turn on your television tonight and watch the news, the negativity that you will hear are coming from people that are very miserable. And so there is a point where let's just admit that we're going in the wrong direction. And if I said I'm going to Seattle, get off the freeway that takes me to Dallas. I'm going to get on a different freeway, a different road to get there. And so the beginnings of it is I've not made a good choice so far. The people, the significant people that I saw giving made that decision in the process of saying, that's not where I want to be. I don't want to die, put my body in a box, and feel like everything I collected should go in the box with me. There's got to be more to it. So that's the first part of it. The second part is I would encourage people to start to, write down what are the commitments you'll make to have courage and have contentment. And then maybe 3 things today. I mean, you could write down, what do I want to do? Well, I want to spend more time with the grandkids that I haven't seen very much. Now, you're not talking about what you're going to do. You're just talking about a commitment to do it. The tactic is going to come later. But I think when people can turn their direction, for one thing, and then define what they want out of life. In other words, you may be in a situation where God has not been important. I choose to fully understand the greatness of what God is because maybe he's got something to do with my life. That's a commitment. Now, for me, I made, I had a different commitment style, but sometimes it's, I want to figure this out. I choose to figure out how I relate to God. I choose to figure out how I relate to my employees more effectively. I learned a long time ago in my, 101 of management that I managed best by wandering around. And I didn't wait for people to come to my office. Every day I would spend 20 to 30 minutes wandering around the people that were working on stuff. Now I had work to do in my office as well and meetings to come, but I found out when I sat down next to the team that was working on stuff that I became a part of their life. And I really like the idea of these buildings today that have no walls. I think sometimes walls have built a lot of resistance. I knew one leader in an office said, he says, if my employees are not going to have offices with walls, I'm not going to have one. Now he said, I've got to have security. So he said, we'll have a conference room over here. We can go and close the doors and I can have hard conversations, but I will work like they work. So I think there's ways to say, I'm going to change my lifestyle and start changing. You can do that at 65 or 70. I'm talking to my 19-year-old and 23-year-old grandson. What are they doing? What's their commitments? And I've often told them, I said, you think you know where you're going right now. And I really like what you're talking about, but you're taking knowledge and you're mixing it with to understanding. And I said, it's going to be 10 or 15 years before you have some wisdom. And in the wisdom, you're going to discover that you go through a lot of hard knocks to get there, because as you grow in faith, it takes exercise, or you got to exercise some. And, people say, well, Larry, how did you ever get through the death of your wife 10 years ago? Well, that was a pretty easy thing when I had the right orientation to where she was. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have a grieving process, but I did not get consumed about her death. I was not wanting her to come back and make me happy. I was thrilled about her transfer of address and what she was getting. I just had to figure out what I was going to do. Those are choices. So even the darkest time when you might think, okay, a 45-year marriage and it ends up with the death of your spouse must be miserable. It was difficult, but it wasn't miserable.
Yeah.
Okay. Difficulty comes because I lost my best friend in the deal. I don't have that capacity to, go for walks and see things together and all the stuff we would do. But that didn't change the fact of what I was here to do. And for some reason, I'm still here and I'm still healthy and I'm still supposed to do it. So be happy, be joyful. The joy in the Lord is my strength that keeps me going, I believe. So the people that are listening, say, recognize that these things are not happening by accident. and realize that although it could be very difficult, there's going to be something, all things work together for the good of those who are called according to God's purpose. So I'm realizing that the difficulty may be the part of my learning curve. And what I've got to do on the curve is just learn not to go over the edge. You know,
So
you've
good.
got to keep your eyes on any highway, because if you don't, you're going to have a mess on your hands, because the road
So
is
good.
straight.
Yeah. Tell me, you've got this book, Intentional Living and Giving. What is the core theme of that book? What are you trying to help people understand or learn from inside your book?
Move from stagnation to dynamic living. It's available for everybody, Matthew. It's not just for the rich and the famous. It's not just for those who have great theological understanding. It's for the average person on the street. It is also can be very helpful to a businessman when he heard the same content that I told you about earlier. The amount of capacity on the financial side has little to do with the message. If in my purpose of the next 10 years, get more and more people to say, I got it, I know who I am, I'm an authorized wealth distributor, giving away God's wealth and resources at his command, and now I've got to figure out how to do that well. So if that's my mission in life, I can even get through a hard day of a backache. Although I'll probably get a few backaches. That comes with the territory.
Love that. That's a very powerful message, because it sounds like your key theme here is stewardship, giving to receive, and helping people find their purpose, their wealth, their abundance through that process. And you have your five key principles. That's the first part of the book. Tell me, what is in the next part of the book? Because we covered the 5 key principles. What I do there,
Matthew, in the second half of the book, and I'd say, now that you've decided to become an authorized wealth distributor, how are you going to live? And there's some key things to that. And that's why I have one chapter on money. So I kind of disclose, I don't believe people should give to everything that comes up to them. I think a good steward makes good judgment calls. Now, for instance, I give to things that have got a spiritual dynamic to them. I don't give to too many political things. That doesn't mean I dislike politics, but I'm not consumed by that, because I got other priorities. And it's because I've chosen my priorities that I don't give to everything. As another example in that story of money, I told a friend that she says, well, I always keep $10 in my car so that when I see a guy on the off-ramp, I can give him $1. And I said, I don't give anybody on an off-ramp $1 ever. She said, well, we're supposed to be helping them. I said, no, I can help them by giving resources to organizations that really help them, get them out of where they're at into a new place. But I'm not going to give a guy anything because I don't feel guilty about not doing it. The reason you give them $1 is you feel guilty. Okay? A smart steward is going to say, no, I will not give to that. I've done my research. You don't deserve it. No, that's not my liking. I don't give to homeless shelters for dogs and cats. I feel badly that we have, cats and dogs that way, but I have other priorities with it. And so I choose to give against my priorities. Now, that's made me doing some thinking, but I don't sit there thinking, oh, I'm emotionally connected to this. This is so sad. I can't handle it. So I got to give them some money to release my guilt. So the money is there. There's another chapter on deception. The world is full of deception. Con artists that are doing great things on it. In the early days of the church coming out 2,000 years ago, it's interesting that the New Testament, people may not realize this, but in the New Testament, every single book except one deals with how you deal with deception. Every book, all the Gospels and all of Paul's writings except the book of Jude. And that's the shortest book in the New Testament, and it does not bring up the subject of deception. And what Paul was saying to the people in the first century, be careful, there is evildoers out there trying to take you for a ride, be smart. So I'm trying to help people be smart. And so in that process, I'm trying to say, I'm not going to tell you who is deceivers. I'm going to give you principles of seeing deception in action so you as a steward can make a wise decision. Another thing that's in that part of the book is that I give them a job description of what their job really is. Because people say, I had a lady probably was in her 60s, and she says, I've never known what my real purpose was in life.
Wow.
And she was a pastor's wife, and she was she was no longer married to him. And she was looking at life saying, I never knew why I'm here. And I'm saying, you have a job description, and I'll give you the job description. And from that job description, you can decide what you're going to do with it. So what I do is I move into the practical side of how do you live a life that's a giving, generous life. And by the time you finish that, you're going to say, okay, I've got some key principles that I can follow, and I can make some prudent decisions. That doesn't mean you got to be a theologian. This book is not written for the academic level of thought. There's a lot of smart people that have written gobs of stuff in similar veins of what I've done probably, but it's more theological. This is not that way. It's a very practical book with even good stories from my childhood and other things that tell the story. But I think what I'm trying to do in that latter half of the book is saying, here are some tools in your toolbox that help you keep being effective in doing what you really want to do. So part of it is understanding who I am. The other part is how do I act about who I am?
Yeah.
And that's really the essence of the book, Matthew. And it's not probably the average person can read it pretty quickly. Every chapter's got a little bit of an exercise that you can work at the end of it. What did you learn from it, and how do you want to think next? Many people read books, skip over that those one-page deals, but it's there to help you, the reader. And I'm just trying to be helpful. So, the more people that pick it up and get it, they can get it. It's available in a download for their Kindle or their tablet or however they get. I believe if your audience goes to larryonan.com, they can download a free copy of the book.
And we'll put that link in the show notes.
And just put it there, and then they can see what's available. Because that's a quick way to get it. Now, it helps me if you're picking up the book. The book is really good. I think there may be people out there that are in their 50s and 60s and say, I think I get the story, but my kids don't get it. Well, then pick up a book and give it. It's written for the Z generation. And a lot of it's written in that context. So if your kids are having trouble struggling with issues and priorities, say, this book, I've read it, and it really helped me crystallize what I believe and what I'm thinking. I think it could help you in your time of crisis and raising kids and trying to make ends meet. And it's bigger than about money. And you can give it to them as a gift. So there's other ways that you can pass it on, because the average person is not going to remember 5 points and all this kind of stuff, but they can say, this helped me, and maybe it will help you. So
good. I love that.
Really use it easy.
So I want to just recap on a few things as we've gone through this journey, and we're coming to the end of this podcast. So a couple of things that I've gathered from your story so far is, and you have these 5 principles, which are guiding principles for learning how to be a good steward. And the latter part of your book is to help you with the tools and resources to keep growing as a human, to find your purpose, and to keep and build wealth, whatever that means for you, right?
Right.
And so a key lesson that we've learned here is about prioritizing your decisions, prioritizing what that means for you, because priorities are obviously super important. A lot of people get distracted, or they don't even understand their priorities, and so they end up running around in these little circles. So I'm learning that from you, and I believe that that's a core context from this book. And the key overarching message here that I love, and what I've learned from you today, is that the giving part of this, like, you've been raising funds, you've raised hundreds of millions of dollars of money, and you've dealt with all these wealthy people, you've seen the give and the take. But what's your key message there about giving, emptying your cup so that you can get more, is one of the very powerful lessons that I've gathered from this learning from you today. And I love that you put that all together in your book. to help people to understand those principles. Am I getting it all right? Is that about
You've
where
got
we're
good
at?
capsulization, Matthew. Good capsulization there. I think many people
Amazing.
today, Matthew, are living like they're going to the old bumper cars in the carnival years ago. Remember the bumper cars when you get in and go around this circle and just try to tear everybody apart and bump them all over the place? And for 5 or 6 minutes, you get your neck out of alignment, you get your back jerked around. Many people are living life like they're driving bumper cars. They're bumping into somebody else or they're being bumped. And they're going in a circle all the time. They're not going anywhere. They're going just there's a boundary that says, I'm just in a circle. And I think we don't in a circle being bumped around. There's a time to get out of the bumper car and start walking again. So yes, you got the point very clearly. And you mentioned just kind of going in a circle. That's what I thought of when you said that is the circle is a jarring part of life. Yeah.
You don't want to be caught up. You don't want to be caught up in going round about in circles that go nowhere, right? It's super important. So I've really enjoyed this conversation that we've had. I've learned quite a bit from you and the journey that you've been on. Love your book. I recommend that everyone should be reading the book, International Living and Giving. I will say that again so that I make sure I get that right. Intentional Living and Giving.
Yeah.
What an amazing name for your book. And I wish you all the best going forward, Larry. Super enjoyed this podcast. And for all the guys that are listening in today, go ahead. We will have the link in the show notes. You'll be able to go to Larry's website and check out that book, and you can take it from there. Amazing, Larry. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's been a blessing and a fun time to chat with you, Matthew. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
God bless. Awesome.